Hello and welcome back to Ballyhoo Creations. Today I'm going to talk about different tools we can use as doll makers. And the first tool I'm going to talk about is scissors. Everyone needs a good pair of scissors. Make sure that you have a separate pair for fabric. I even get a Sharpie and I'll put fabric only on my fabric only scissors. And then I have a couple of different pairs for that. And then I have a different pair that I know these are my paper pattern scissors or other cardboard things like that. These are the scissors for that, so I never cut my fabric. I never cut anything but fabric with these. That'll keep the blades nice and sharp for longer. There's other types of scissors as well. These are applique scissors, and they have a little spoon edge there on the bottom. It's a little rounded surface. So what these are for is if you're doing applique or something, you can get right up next to your stitch line and get a nice even seam allowance all the way around. You can see how that works. So depending on the kind of doll, if you put patches or appliques on your doll, applique scissors, you probably already have some, but these are a wonderful thing to play around with. And then the thing that I use the most actually are little curved embroidery scissors, or this is actually a pair of cuticle scissors, and you can see the blade is a little bit curved, and what that does is it gets right up next to the surface of your fabric. So when I'm trimming threads, I can get right up next to the bottom there. This is great for embroidery or clipping threads. Also when you're trimming away from a seam, same thing with what we did with those applique scissors, but you can, with this one, you can get right up next to it. Let me get that extra piece off. Because of that curved blade, you can get right up next to your seam. Hemostats. These are a life-changing tool if you're making dolls or stuffed animals. You can use these for turning things inside out. You can use them for stuffing. You can place things with them as if they were tweezers. You could use them for holding and clamping because they have these locking jaws. These are one of the best tools for doll makers. They can reach into stuff places that you normally wouldn't be able to reach. Depending on what size you have, you can really get your stuffing into a tight spot, even with little doll fingers. These are wonderful. This is like a 10-11 inch pair for the big ones, and this is a 5-inch pair. You can get all different sizes of hemostats. I bought these at American Science and Surplus many years ago. They used to be hard to find, but now with Amazon, I see sets of these. There's like maybe 5 or 6 different sizes in a set, and I think they're like $12 or $15 for the entire set. So such a good deal. Just get you at least a good pair, maybe 2 in different sizes depending on what size dolls you know. I stitch my cloth dolls. I do use glues from time to time. Sometimes I'll use a fabric glue. This is a clear glue, maybe for attaching hair, maybe for attaching facial features. If you're embellishing a doll, you'll want to have a good fabric glue that will stick to fabric. A lot of the white glues or things don't stick to fabric. Also, a glue stick is very handy. It doesn't even matter what brand, even the cheap one works, but this works good as basting. You can attach 2 pieces of fabric together or attach your fabric to a stabilizer like this, and then when you're doing free motion embroidery, your needle doesn't gum up with a glue stick. So this is a nice way to tack it down, especially when I'm doing a machine embroidery. I can hoop my stabilizer and then just use the glue stick to attach the fabric so it won't shift around, and that works great for me. So I use a lot of glue sticks in my sewing room. Needles. Who can sew without needles? I am a bit of a needle hoarder, I will admit. I have a lot of, this is not even my entire collection of needles. But first off, for sewing machine needles, I like to use a heavy needle for making dolls and stuffed animals. If you're sewing fur, you have to have a thick needle. This is a size 14, that's what I usually will put in my sewing machine. Size 14 will go through leather. These are specifically leather needles. They'll work on fur, they'll work on denim, they'll work on canvas, they'll work on multiple layers of fabric and stabilizer. So usually I'll just put a 14 in my machine and go. It is very rare that I'm using a fine fabric that this will leave a big hole in the fabric. So usually that's not a problem for the stuff that I make. Try a size 14 and see. I know a lot of us put a size 8 or 10 or maybe even a 12 in there, and then you might have problems with needles breaking. If your needles break on you, put a bigger needle in there and see if you like that better. I got a vintage pair of needles that has the curved ones. You can see these are curved needles. These are handy for doing whip stitching when you're sewing up the back of a doll or stuffed animal, something like this. If you use a whip stitch, the curved needle makes it go faster. And then of course we have our long, these are for soft sculpture, these big long ones. And then we've also got tapestry needles. We've got, this is like what, a 3-inch, 3.5-inch needle. So these are very, I like these for sewing up the backs, things like this, whether you're doing a ladder stitch or however you're sewing up the back of your doll or stuffed animal. Having these needles is so much easier for me because the small ones, they get lost, especially if you're dealing with fur. The longer ones are just easier to deal with. Maybe it's because my eyes are going, because I'm getting old, but long needles, big fan. They come in different packages, like different sizes. This is a 3-inch, this is a 6-inch. I've seen them 7 or 8 inches even. If you're doing a soft sculpture on like the full body of a doll, you'll want something that's long enough that can go all the way through the body of the doll or the doll's head. And then the last thing, I've got a couple of other extra things to talk about. A lot of people like these air erase pens for marking on your fabric, and I don't use them all the time. I'll use pencil or sometimes even Sharpie because I like to do my patterns and I may come back days later and this will have already dissolved, and it's gone. But for other things, it leaves a really nice mark on your fabric. Here, I'll do it on fabric too so you can see. You can really see the markings and then it will fade away on its own. So I would recommend that if you do a lot of markings. It's a good thing to have. Another thing is an awl with the sharp tip, and then it's graduated and gets bigger towards the end. If you're doing joints in your dolls and stuffed animals or attaching the plastic safety eyes, instead of cutting a hole in your fabric with scissors or with a hole punch, use an awl, because what that will do is it spreads the threads of the fabric apart rather than breaking them. You can see how I'm doing it right here. And I don't have any broken threads, or maybe just a few, so the likelihood of my fabric running and fraying and becoming unraveled around a joint or a safety eye is much less because I'm not breaking those threads. I'm just stretching them apart with that awl. So that's all I had for today. I'm going to go back to work on this guy. I'm not sure what I'm doing with him yet, but you know, that's the journey of the doll maker, right? You never really know what they're going to look like until they're done. If you have any wonderful tools that you love to craft with when you're doll making, please let me know if I've missed anything. I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment down below or click over to the blog and we can have a discussion over there. I would love to hear from you. See you later.